Roster moves, yeah, we built from the grind. Draft day gems and the best all around. Sit out on the tape, breaking it clear. From first round locks to the late round tier. Cap space tight, left the visions wide. Future of the league, we along for the ride. Holland and Andrew on the grind outside. With props to each draft, we stay on top.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Murdick. That is Kyle Fellows, and together we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure you're checking out the channel on YouTube or the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. Kyle, you're back this week. How you doing?
I'm back. It is so good to be. We seriously haven't talked until pre-show for this, like in, I don't know, close to 2 months probably. So it is good. I joked on the last show I did by myself that people legitimately were reaching out and like asking if we were okay, like if we had broken up or like had this falling out or something. But no, it's super good to be back with you and really get our heads together, because we have not really talked football in a very long time. This is fun.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy? I just realized Andy Herman had mentioned on the Pack a Day podcast that they just hit their 7-year anniversary, which means you and I have also hit our 7th anniversary of podcasting together. Because we did episode 2 of the Pack a Day podcast, and then obviously we were there for a very, very, very long time, almost 7 years. So we've been doing this for quite some time, and so it's exciting, but this is like such an exciting time of year because obviously we're getting all the camp stories, we're getting the buzz, and everybody's going to have a wonderful year. Everybody's going to be an all-pro this season. You make a one-handed catch in training camp, and people will put you on Twitter.
It's true. My favorite are the players that are like third-year players that have not done anything, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, this is the year, everything's good in camp, and you start to believe it. Like you're like, no, not initially, and then 2 or 3 days of camp reports, and you're like, all right, third year is going to be the charm, and we're going to be good. But it happens every year. But you know, it wouldn't be training camp without those stories.
And I will be over investing in Kyle Pitts in fantasy football for the 5th straight year. Don't worry. Yes. I will buy into the buzz every single time.
Yes, 100%.
So you and I each did a show separately last week where we talked about 6 rookies that we were really looking forward to seeing, not just over training camp, but throughout the preseason and of course the regular season, who had really great opportunities to start their careers off the right way. So we thought we would get back together and then analyze each other's list. So you want to go ahead and do that?
Yeah, let's jump right in here.
Okay, I was stalling because I forgot where I needed to click to bring up the banner.
It's been a little while since we've been together. So here we go.
I don't know how I ever do this on my own. But so the first player that I mentioned was quarterback Tyler Shuck out of the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I did actually listen to your show, believe it or not. I don't always listen to Andrew's stuff, but I did. And this one, I think this is a great call. Like, and what is so interesting to me is I hope that he really gets his fair shake there in New Orleans, right? Like, there are people already talking about Garrett Nussmeier going to the New Orleans Saints, you know, after this season. Like, his dad's the OC there, and like that's almost like too like buttoned up and like perfect. Like, I don't know that the Saints would do that. That relationship would be very interesting. But like, Tyler Shuck is a player that like ascended through the draft process, landed in a place where like I think a lot of people were like, well, this guy's not going to start right away. He might start right away. And I think that this is fascinating that like he's going to get that opportunity with an offensive coordinator coming over from Philly that knows what he's doing. Like, the creativity is going to be there. I just hope that he really gets a fair shake, because maybe in another spot he wouldn't. And I'm just so excited for the player, for him to step into that place and get to, you know, potentially find a landing spot there with the Saints and become an NFL starter. Like, what a cool story.
Yeah, and then your first player was defensive lineman Tyleik Williams for the Detroit Lions. And Williams is one of those players that you and I had pretty big disagreements on in the draft process. You were a lot higher than I was.
It's true.
And when the Lions took him at the end of the first round, it wasn't necessarily a huge surprise to me, but I thought like, that's like kind of an uninspiring pick. But I think you laid out a great argument. One, the Lions are down 2 of their best defensive linemen, and so Williams is going to be forced into a role right away. But as a team that is going to really have to be able to buckle down against the run, especially given not just what's in the NFC North, but looking larger picture, who the best teams in the NFC are, especially Philadelphia. If they're hoping to make that jump, if they're able to stay healthy, they're going to need to stop Saquon and Jalen Hurts at some point. And Tyreek Williams is going to go a long ways towards doing that. And so I think his performance and his ability to transition quickly into the NFL is going to be a really, really big deal for this Detroit team to be able to, be successful under a first-year defensive coordinator.
Absolutely. Dylan Sampson, you talked about with the Browns. Obviously, we're talking about a situation there where they take a running back really early, and Quinshon Judkins, who I honestly, if you had told me there was a player who was having trouble off the field, he would not have been close to the top of that list. Like I just thought he was squeaky clean. I thought this was a guy you can get in your building and is going to be a contributor for a long time. So obviously all those legal things have to play out, but Dylan Sampson's a player that we thought was buried, right? Like this is the guy who was going to be potentially behind Jerome Ford and maybe be the third running back for this team. And now we're looking at like a skill set that was intriguing to a lot of people, but now he might get to step in and, due to some like unfortunate circumstances, like have a really big role for this team. So I do think preseason is big for him. Training camp is big for him because there's a lot of questions around what that Browns team in general is going to be, but also what this backfield is going to look like. So good for him. Hopefully he can take advantage of a really rotten situation there in Cleveland.
Yeah, and we anticipate the Browns not being a particularly good football team this year. And so I would imagine they're going to want to see what they have in their young players rather than running a Jerome Ford into the ground, who you don't necessarily think is part of your future.
Right.
And so I anticipate Sampson getting a lot of opportunities. Of course, somebody had to pick a Packers player.
Had to.
You talked about wide receiver Matthew Golden. I think this is fascinating because, I was on the Pack-A-Day radio show last week, and I was talking about like the Packers wide receiver situation is fascinating because like you don't know who is going to be the target leader, like even close.
No.
There's 5 different players that could be their wide receiver target leader, probably 6 if you include Tucker Kraft.
Yes.
I don't think Golden is going to be, but I could see him being such a key component to this offense because we know as Packer fans, when Christian Watson was healthy, this offense looks so drastically different just because that threat of beating you over the top opens up so much of what their other players' skill sets are great at. And so, of course, Josh Jacobs on the ground, but you talk about Tucker Kraft and Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks. And so, like, if Golden is able to show that he can beat players over the top and safeties have to respect him, I think this Packers offense has an opportunity to be really successful. And maybe you see Golden having a Xavier Worthy like rookie season where he has some big explosive plays, but his impact is probably even bigger than the stats show.
Yeah. And I mentioned that in the show, but like, it is so interesting. Like we joked at the beginning of the show, there's always that guy who's the 3rd-year breakout. And right now, like Dontavian Wicks is getting a little bit of that in Packers camp early. And so that makes the Golden situation that much more interesting. Like how much do the Packers make him prove that he should be on the field? Or, I mean, 1st-round pick gets to play. I think it's just going to be worth watching for sure as we work through training camps around the league.
And I double dipped here. Titans wide receivers, Alec Iomenor and Chimere Dike.
Yeah, so this one, probably one of my favorite things that you talked about on that show, just because the Titans wide receiver room is so interesting. Not only that, but you sprinkle in Cam Ward and you're talking about chemistry things, right? Obviously, Calvin Ridley is there. He's the vet. He's an aging vet, but he's a player that, like, you talk about like mileage on a car. Like maybe Ridley has a little bit longer of a shelf life because he had some delayed adolescence through the league, right? Like this is a guy, it took a little while for us to acquire the mileage like you normally would. I think he's maybe entering his 30th or 31st year as an athlete, and maybe he's got a little bit more there. So, but you sprinkle in these young players, DK, Iomenor, And then I also wanted to mention like Xavier Restrepo. Like this is a
Yeah.
group that like Restrepo played with Cam Ward at Miami, and obviously Restrepo tested horrifically, but he's reliable and Ward knows exactly what he's getting from him. So I think you talk about, I think we know, I give you a hard time because Ao Manor was like a player you loved and I liked, right? But I think DK has the speed. Ao Manor can be that like reliable player who can be someone that you can feed, right? And then Restrepo, like it just, you kind of wonder like what's the chemistry going to be? Like who's Cam Ward going to decide is his guy? So that's a really fun one that I think we'll get to see develop over the next couple of weeks.
And you mentioned the quarterback Jackson Dart out of, or for the New York Giants. I always want to say out of because we talk so many
Out of,
draft
yeah.
prospects. Yeah, out of Ole Miss. So Dart, whose name is spelled incorrectly on this slide. Way to go, Kyle.
Jackson Dart.
Yeah,
Are you
there's an
sure?
S. There's an S in there.
Wait a
He
second. You
spells
talk.
Jackson. Yeah, he spells Jackson weird. But anyways, so this is another player that we had very different opinions on. You were much higher than on Jackson Dart than I was. And I will say, like, I think this is a really intriguing opportunity. I think the New York Giants have a chance to be a better team than a lot of people think because I think they potentially have an elite level defense. Now their
Okay.
offense probably a dumpster fire, but like if they can get just enough out of Russell Wilson, maybe they can keep the ship afloat long enough that they don't force Jackson Dart in. What I'm worried about is if they start off poorly and they're beginning like first 6 or 7 games are real rough. And so if those don't go well, there's probably going to be a lot of pressure on a GM and a head coach that are on hot seats to push the young quarterback in right away. And that makes me really nervous because I think Jackson is a guy who could potentially be really good if he's given a year to develop. I'm not so sure that he's ready to go in right now, especially behind what the Giants have on their offensive line and be really successful, right? Like, I don't think this is going to be a great run game to support him. He does have at least one elite weapon, and then Wan'Dale Robinson is getting paid. Their tight end room's pretty solid. So the weapons I'm not so concerned about, but it's like if the running game doesn't take the pressure off of a young quarterback and the offensive line can't hold up, you may be putting him in harm's way. And then suddenly he's got a new coach and coordinator next year and a GM that is not committed to him, and then I get real worried about what his future is. So I'm hoping that if Jackson does have to play this year, he can be successful because I no matter what I thought about his prospect, really rooting for him to be the answer in New York.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're on the same page that like I'm not hoping to see him play early. I'm just going to be fascinated in the preseason, like how well do those other vets, JMO and Russ Wilson, like perform to like keep that coaching staff and GM from saying like, hey, we picked the next guy and they can hitch their wagon to that. So that'll be really, really interesting to see how that goes. But you talked about Edge James Pierce Jr. and I was probably a little lower on James Pierce than consensus. I don't even remember where you had him stacked, but this is a player that like he's going to come in and he's going to be that one trick pony. But you played that really well in that show that like maybe that's all they need. Like if he can come in and do that and do it really well, and like there's reason to think looking at the Tennessee tape that like he should be able to continue to do at least that well. He can be a designated pass rusher pretty well. So I will be fascinating to see how the Falcons deploy him, what percentage of snaps he gets early in his career, because I think he can be an impact player if he can, have a pretty specific role for this team early.
Yeah, and given what the Falcons gave up for him, really hoping that is the case,
Yeah.
that he can be successful early because, one-dimensional players are going to have to be really, really good at that one dimension. You mentioned wide receiver Trey Harris with the Chargers, who is now like he was the darling of a lot of people in the draft, and especially you.
I like
And I think his landing spot was seen as really like sneakily advantageous. And then you get Mike Williams' retirement, and now he potentially is thrust into a starting role. I think him and Quentin Johnston will probably take a lot of those outside reps with Ladd in the slot. And it'll be interesting if they go two wide receivers, which one of them, between Quentin Johnston and Trey Harris win out in those roles. But I think Harris has an opportunity to be really, really impactful. I don't know that his stats are going to look great because I don't know that the Chargers are a team that wants to throw the ball enough to really let a wide receiver 2 shine, especially with a target hog like Ladd McConkey. But Harris could be really, really impactful. And there's a lot of things he does really well that I think translate well into what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. So excited to see what he can do. And I think you laid that out really well.
All right. Your next guy you talked about was Carson Schlesinger for the Browns. And this was one that I hadn't really considered. That's the team situation. You basically laid it out and said, not only do we like the prospect, although he was a little green, like coming into the draft, but we said like the trajectory is certainly there for him to continue to develop into an impact linebacker. But you kind of laid out like the situation with the Browns, like he may start right away. And I think that it's not only like a this year thing, but it's a next year thing where like he's probably going to be one of 2 pieces in that duo in that linebacker group. And I think he has the potential to be the leader and an impact athlete for that defense for a long time. And so I was glad you kind of clued us into that like, no, like this is not a player that they're going to develop and then plug in. Like he may be a piece for this team right now.
Yeah. And then you brought up edge Josiah Stewart for the Rams because, of course, he had to sneak a Michigan guy in here.
Yeah, I got it.
No, I know you love Josiah Stewart because we had a talk when we put our combined top 100 lists together of who we were going to include. And you were banging the table for Josiah Stewart. And he was a top 100 pick, so good work on that. But yeah, I think with the Rams, you laid out, they don't necessarily care about your athletic testing at all. They do happen to have some really athletic guys, but even over and above what you mentioned, you take a look at like Cameron Kinchins from last year, a guy who tested really bad, had a really nice rookie year. And I think Josiah Stewart, he looks so much better on film than he does, at the combine. And so that's a good thing for the Rams. They love these kind of players. And if he can be a productive edge player, they already have the interior pressure coming. And so if he can get on that line where they already have 3 young, really, really big difference makers, I think he could have a phenomenal rookie year because the attention is not going to be focused on him. And he's just going to be able to do his thing. And his pass rush arsenal is really impressive for a young player.
Yeah, absolutely. So
and then I had safety Nick Emanwari for the Seattle Seahawks.
This one I really was fascinated by because of the connection with Baltimore and what they did with Kyle. Oh my gosh, what's his last
Hamilton.
name? Thank you. In Baltimore, just the similarities in those players. And obviously the coaching staff transfer there to Seattle Seahawks. But I love that fit for him because of that. I think a lot of people thought, okay, there's been a lot of safeties who have come in the league who've been bigger guys who've kind of been impact players in college football, and then just it hasn't translated super well. Nick Emanwari is probably the most athletic of those big safeties that's come in a while, and is also a really good football player. Like we've seen the guys who are the athletes, but maybe they just don't have the football traits. I think he stands the best chance to kind of buck that trend and go ahead and be a really, really good football player. So excited to see him early on in his career stick with the Seahawks, and they just haven't had maybe those impact players in the back end of their secondary since they were the Legion of boom over the years. And I just think that it would be really cool to see another guy get in there and have that impact early.
Yeah, and then the last player on the list is interior offensive lineman Jared Wilson for the New England Patriots. And all the Patriots need to worry about this year is keeping Drake May upright. Not only is New England a team that is going to have a really good defense, like you heard it here first, if you haven't heard it yet. But I think this is an opportunity that if they can get a little bit of protection for Drake May, they're going to have a really fun duo in the backfield behind him. So hopefully they can get the running game going. And then if you give Drake May a little bit of time, I know the weapons aren't ideal, but maybe we see a resurgence from Stephon Diggs. Maybe you get one of the young receivers that they have in this seemingly lengthy depth chart to step up and be a good wide receiver too. And this offense could really get cooking. But that all starts with that protection up front. And I think Jared Wilson is going to be he's going to have every opportunity to start in one of those three interior spots. And I think if he can step up and really provide not only that running game with a boost, but give Drake May the protection that he needs, this is going to be a Patriots team that has a chance to surprise a lot of people.
All right, so bonus content at the end of this show, Andrew. I wanted to ask you this question. It's tied in here with the Patriots, but I mean, you talk about the offensive line, all the work that they're doing there. You hinted at the fact that like this is a wide receiver room that is like fascinating, I guess is like maybe the best word to like describe it. But I mean, they brought in Kyle Williams, who a lot of like people were like really, really high on. I don't know if we were kind of middle of the road. I think you like Kyle Ferrin. No. Okay. We
Not
were
really.
probably a little lower than the consensus on Kyle Williams, but they brought him in. Stephon Diggs brought in free agent. Demario Douglas still there. Jalen Polk was a second round pick last year. And I love Javon Baker, and it seems like maybe like I was a little wrong about Javon Baker. I probably should start dropping him from some of my fantasy dynasty leagues, but I refuse to do it. Like I still believe in Javon Baker, but like I guess have we moved on? Like I've seen some projected depth charts from Patriots people who have like Jalen Polk as like wide receiver like 4 or 5. And I just like, have we moved on completely from the draft class last year and are just like blowing it up and starting over? I'm just curious where you think, if you had to guess today, where does this wide receiver group end up? And like, is it a good move? Like, should they be more patient with the guys that they've brought in?
I've actually heard some Patriots, like some people that know Patriots football that have indicated that maybe Jalen Polk's roster spot is up for grabs.
It's crazy.
Like he could get
Yes.
cut. I have a really hard time believing that because Elliott Wolf is still the guy calling the shots,
Yeah.
and he drafted him, and that looks pretty
Yeah.
bad as a
Yeah.
whatever his title is
Yeah.
in lieu of
Yeah.
GM.
Yeah. Right.
It looks pretty bad if you have to cut a second round pick a year later. I I just I know he wasn't necessarily like my favorite guy in the world at Washington. I just
Same.
feel like there's something there, and give this offense a chance to be competent and see if he can work within that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this isn't what you asked, and it's not a
Okay.
player you mentioned, but I
Okay.
actually think the sneaky player who could win that number 2 wide receiver spot is Kayshon Boutte,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
or Booty, if you
Interesting.
will.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Very interesting. So, yeah.
I loved him at LSU. Had him
Okay.
ranked way, 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 way too high.
I remember that.
And
Yeah.
he goes in the 7th round, and I was like, okay, he's still super, super young. I think this is his 3rd year. But he came out at he was 20
Young.
in that draft
Yeah.
class, and I just think there were some flashes at the end of the year that make me really optimistic that maybe he could turn around. I'm not saying he's ever going to be a great wide receiver, but I think he has a chance to be pretty solid.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating because he's a name I did, I brushed over it earlier, but I was not as high on Butte as you were. I'm still writing the Javon Baker, and I'm gonna crash and burn on that one. But like, no, like he was one that like I remember when they brought in Drake May, there was a little chemistry there that kind of picked up again
Yeah.
with his stock. So of all these conversations, I really think that the Patriots, like you said, stand a chance to be a sneaky team this year. It's just like, who's actually going to be good? Like, who's going to catch the ball? And like, I mean, Butte probably underdrafted in some ways. Jalen Polk probably overdrafted a little bit, but just will be so interesting to see how this all shakes out and who they end up playing there in their 3 wide receiver sets when it comes to actual game time.
Absolutely.
So this has been a really fun conversation. We got to go back over those 2 other shows. Andrew and I have been talking about some things that we've got coming in the next couple weeks. So make sure you stay connected to us. We are on the cusp of real football discussions, whether that's college football, whether that's the NFL, and now that we're in training camp and the preseason. So stick with us. But thanks for joining us for this show. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show. Share us with a friend. It's been so fun just to get the love you guys have shared with us as we've begun to grow this show a little bit. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellas have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Yo, we break it down, strategy in the booth. Yeah, build a roster up, that's the ultimate truth. Murder get fellows, we breaking the lies. Yo, draft day, also watch these players slide. Hey, discussing picks, we analyze every skill. NFL dreams, you know we got that thrill. From college to the pros,